We did a part 1 explaining what individual perfume notes smell like, because I find that the perfume world is a bit gate-kept. You don't really know what individual notes are like. You'll see these notes on Fragrantica pages, and you might think to yourself, what does that fragrance note actually smell like? In this series, I don't cover notes that are very obvious, things like grapefruit or mandarin or orange, but more the strange notes, things like previously in the part 1 we did patchouli or aquatic notes or cologne. In this video, I'm going to cover 5 more ingredients, explaining to you how they smell individually to help you guys learn more about the art of perfumery. And then I'm going to try and give you very perfect examples to go and try out if you want to smell these individual notes in a very prominent fashion. Let's begin.
Mr. Romantic. This is the new fragrance that was just released by Omar over at the YouTube channel School of Scent. Definitely has a very mainstream feel to it as well. It starts to change pretty quickly after the first spray. As it dries, this very spicy, smooth cardamom starts to come out a little bit more, and this lavender kind of brings a very subtle freshness. Beautiful scent. Hats off to you, Omar. Great job. I think that Mr. Romantic is a win for me.
Let's start off with coumarin, which I've just diluted here to 10% myself. Coumarin is actually the main constituent of tonka bean. It's one of the first modern perfume molecules discovered in the late 19th century that pretty much birthed the entire modern perfume industry. And here's what it looks like in its natural form. It is a white powder. I swear this is just perfume stuff, nothing else, guys. This stuff is annoying. It's a bit like sand. If you accidentally open it and drop some whilst you're trying to dilute it and work with it, it gets everywhere and your room just stinks and you can't breathe for at least a month. So yeah, this stuff is potent. Even at 10%, I find just adding 1 drop into a formula just really can overpower a fragrance. So if I open this suspicious looking white bag I have here, I smell the powder, I will say that this smells like marzipan. Coumarin is found in a lot of things, not just tonka bean, but if you look in the back of a lot of perfume packaging, look at the ingredients, you'll find that the vast majority of perfumes in modern times uses coumarin. It has to be noted as an allergen. It is a very common way to add sweetness to a perfume formula. In high concentrations, it smells very marzipan-like, very warm, sweet, hay-like. A lot of people compare this to hay. So I think this is a different way to sweeten up a formulation that is different to the very obvious vanilla that other fragrances use. If you want to try out tonka bean and really experience the note for what it is, then I recommend Prada Luna Rosa Black. Very obvious tonka bean fragrance. So again, tonka bean, as far as I know, is very expensive, so most perfumers actually use coumarin. And this fragrance, you'll find that it's sweet, but not in a very typical way. You'll see that it's very unique, has a very high amount of tonka in here that adds this warmth and sweetness in here, but in a very almond marzipan-like, as I've mentioned. This is dark, smooth, and it's never overpowering because it doesn't go overly sweet. The tonka, I find generally, if you use it too much, it can go a bit too synthetic, but generally won't be overpowering in a sweetness like you get with vanilla fragrances. I'm now gonna put this white powder away so it doesn't get everywhere. And another very obvious tonka bean fragrance to try out is Mancera's Tonka Cola. Very high amounts of tonka bean in that fragrance. Actually smells a little bit synthetic. They've gone very unapologetic with how much coumarin they've used in there. Next up we have cedarwood, or Virginian cedarwood I have specifically here. There are many variations of cedarwood, so I believe this is a natural ingredient that you can actually extract from the woods themselves. Different variations from different trees will have different smells. Virginian cedarwood is fairly common. You'll see it in some note breakdowns in Fragrantica. If I had to explain what this smells like, it smells like dry pencil shavings. This gives a woodiness, of course, to the fragrance formulation, longevity. This is a base note. Gives some freshness and some uplift to a fragrance, but it does smell like pencil shavings if used too prominently. I think this is a note that you cannot go too heavy on because, as I said, it just smells a bit weird from that pencil shavings effect. If you want to experience exactly what I'm talking about, then try out this fragrance here. This is the Labo Santal 33. The name will make you think that this fragrance is a sandalwood fragrance, but I do not think so. I don't agree. I think this is more prominently a Virginian cedarwood fragrance. This has the perfect example of Virginian cedarwood. It's a good way to see if you like the notes and see if you enjoy cedarwood fragrances in general. This has that dry pencil shavings effect, which is kind of cool. I would forgive it if it was just that, but then it has pickle juice in there as well. I don't know why it smells like pickle juice. A lot of people say that. I don't like this fragrance, but it's always an interesting fragrance to own for me to bring out and present to you guys. It's one of the Labo's most popular fragrances. Definitely one of their top, I think, from what I've heard. Very long lasting, definitely impressive performance. But yeah, try it before you buy this because it is unique. Then we have sandalwood here, Javanol, which is one of the main molecules for sandalwood. So again, there are various molecules out there that are associated in the sandalwood family. As far as I know, Javanol is one of the most prominent, and I think it's one of the more old school smelling sandalwood notes out there. Javanol or sandalwood is very powerful. It is a base note that adds projection to your fragrance, adds a lot of longevity, classiness. It smells like a very thick, woody, creamy note that this Javanol variation here then adds a bit of a brightness, a sharpness in there. So it actually has a bit of freshness, brightness, ethereal effect into the fragrance that can be very overpowering. Very, very powerful stuff. This is diluted to 10%, but I think you can dilute this to 1% because this is just something, if you add just one drop to your formulation, you can completely change the fragrance. It is super, super potent. So if you want to experience the impressive performance and woodiness that you get from Javanol, this is a fragrance to check out. Chanel's Egoiste, the original. Very spicy fragrance with some rose in here or some florals with some tobacco. I think leather's in here as well, but then obviously there's a big, big sandalwood note in here, in my opinion. This is very much a Javanol fragrance. After working with that molecule, I then smelled this for the first time. I hadn't smelled it before, and I could just detect straight away Javanol. When you smell it, you can just know it straight away. It is the sharp, woody effect that you get from this fragrance. When you think about how thick and woody this fragrance is Javanol in a nutshell. So try out Egoiste and see what old school, traditional sandalwood smells like. It's one of the best notes in perfumery in my opinion. Javanol does smell a bit old school. You must not go too high with it, but this goes fairly high with it. It's a little bit unapologetic again, so it's a good way to try it out. And plus, this is just a great fragrance in general, a mature, classy, spicy, woody fragrance for more, mature men in general. Great for the office as well. In the last video, we discussed Hacivat. In this video, we're going to discuss Castoreum, a controversial perfume note that, similar to Hacivat, used to come from animals. This comes from the sacs down below of beavers that they use to mark their territory with their urine, and I believe now it's pretty much banned in most perfume industries because obviously it comes from animals, so most animal products are banned in fragrances and they've been replaced with synthetic replicas. Castoreum smells very animalic, musky, like you would expect from an animal-like product, but then has this leatheriness to it. It can give it a very obvious leathery note that if you go too high with can make a fragrance smell fecal in a similar way to Hacivat. Hacivat gives an ambery note if it's used in the right amounts, very small amounts, becomes fecal and dirty and animalic if used too high. Similar to Castoreum, you create a nice smooth leather effect, but don't use it too high, otherwise the fragrance becomes fecal. I'm giving Chanel a lot of love in this video. I'm going to go for Antaeus if you want to experience Castoreum. Antaeus uses Castoreum perfectly. It has that slight animalic effect. This is very much a lavender clean fragrance, darkened out with this sweet, elegant myrrh, and it has that really manly, rugged, animalic nature from Castoreum. The animalic stuff that you're getting from Antaeus here is from Castoreum. Is a great way to experience it. It's very classy, very smooth. They use it in a very palatable way. Kouros is more tough as an animalic fragrance, whilst Antaeus is a very easy way to get into the animalic family of fragrances. It's extremely classy. It smells like a boss. I always say if you want to smell like a boss, intense, really masculine, with great performance around 10 hours, Antaeus is a masterpiece. I think it could potentially be the #1 fragrance in Chanel actually, but it's not going to be for everyone. So definitely try it out. And lastly, we have Oakmoss. Labeled as Mousse de Chien on my label here, but this is Oakmoss. It's one of the most prominent notes in perfumery and another controversial fragrance note, but for a different reason to Castoreum. This has been mostly banned because it's been seen as an allergenic by the fragrance regulator IFRA, which has caused a lot of chaos in the fragrance world. So Oakmoss is a plant that's grown in a lot of countries in the Northern Hemisphere, but I think perfumers may have prominently found this back in Cyprus because this is one of the main notes that's used in the Chypre accord. Chypre in perfumery means Cyprus. So it's I think, and from what I've heard, that's where perfumers found Oakmoss. They use it from Cyprus, and it creates this very intense, dark, and very traditional perfumery style that you will recognize if you've ever smelled a Chypre fragrance before. Think Aramis, the original fragrance. That's a classic Chypre. Because of its allergenic properties, IFRA has deemed that perfumers have to use certain variants of Oakmoss that are less allergenic, but it does reduce the potency of the note in its natural form. Oakmoss has had to be reduced in its concentration in fragrances a lot, and I think it's a shame. In my opinion, this is one of the greatest notes in perfumery. If you smell it on its own pure, it is so beautiful. I can see why perfumers use it to such high amounts. It is a base note, it has longevity, it has handsomeness. You'll find it very often in men's perfumery, and it's just very magical in a scent profile. It has a beautiful projection to it, and it's very difficult to explain, but I would say this smells ethereal, magical, sparkly, mossy, a little bit woody, hence why you'd always see woody chypre fragrances. Something like this, Oakmoss, blends well with woods, dark, intense, handsome, masculine, a little bit fuzzy, a bit addictive in my opinion. Fragrances high in their concentration of Oakmoss can sometimes smell a little bit old school. For example, Antaeus is also an Oakmoss fragrance, but an example I will give to you that's a bit more modern is Nishane's Hacivat, which, yes, is a fantastic fragrance that people see as an alternative to Creed Aventus. I think it's very much worth its price tag. Very fresh, pineapple-y, fruity, smoky, clean, and very prominent in its mossiness, which comes from the oak moss here. It smells very natural. It has a very good example of high amounts of prominent oak moss. It's a niche fragrance that a lot of people need to try. If you haven't tried it, you really need to, because if people are comparing it to Aventus, it's just one of those things. If you're a collector, you should know about it. Get a sample if you need to, or buy a bottle. It's got very good critical acclaim as a fragrance in general. It's beast mode, very long lasting, very mossy, and that oak moss, as I said, is a base note which probably helps with that performance in general. That concludes this video, guys. Did you find this helpful? I love doing this educational perfumery content. I feel like it's a lot more interesting than the usual top 10 list that us reviewers love to do, but you know, it definitely requires more brain power from myself, but I do enjoy doing it if you guys are getting a lot out of it. So yeah, let me know, guys. I'd love to hear your feedback down below. Did you learn something new? Are you now interested in trying out these notes and these examples I've given? Have you tried out these fragrances? Do you now feel like you can pick out the notes more easily? Do you find this content useful? Do you want to see a part 3? Let me know, guys. If you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure to check out part 1 of this series. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.